Last fall, after a successful clinical trial, the Dana-Farber Brigham and Women's Cancer Center began offering a breakthrough drug to treat cancer. It's called CAR T-cell therapy, and essentially it equips a patient's immune system with the tools it needs to fight their own disease. The treatment of Dana-Farber is specifically for the blood cancer non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and in the trial, 82% of patients responded to the drug, 36% remain in complete remission. And while immunotherapy developments are still in their early stages, new treatments are being approved every year, and researchers are seeing promise in its future, thanks in part to federal investments. According to the American Society of Clinical Oncology, more than 25% of the nation's top advances in cancer treatment were partially funded by the National Institutes of Health and other federal agencies. But earlier this year, Dana-Farber's president sounded an alarm about the future of cancer research in the U.S., writing in a recent op-ed for the Boston Globe's Stat News, quote, "Declining levels of federal funding for biomedical research along with inefficient allocation of funds by the National Institutes of Health are jeopardizing innovation." Dr. Lori Glimcher, who also helped develop the Federal Cancer Moonshot Initiative, joins me now. It's so good to see you, Doctor. Thanks so much for being here.
Nice to see you.
Before we get to the substance, 15 months as head of the highest profile cancer institute in the country, if not the world. How stressful is that? What have the first 15 months been like?
Oh, it's been terrific, actually. The quality of the research that's done there and the quality of the patient care that's delivered is really inspiring to me.
You don't feel crushing pressure because of the responsibility?
No, because I come in every morning. I wake up every morning and hear these wonderful stories about how we're treating our patients, and so that really keeps me going.
So I mentioned you and two of your colleagues were sounding an alarm in Stat News about federal funding. What specifically is happening in the last handful of months that caused that concern?
Well, it isn't just the last handful of months, actually. The amount of NIH funding over the last decade has declined by about 20% in real dollar terms. That's right. And so we're losing pipeline talent, and we're having senior researchers abandon the field because they can't get their grants funded.
I'm allowed one naive question on the night, so this is my naive question. Yeah. Who would not support additional research? Every Republican, every Democrat, every independent is touched by cancer somewhere in their universe. So why wouldn't this be almost, and it's short money too, almost the top priority? I don't get it.
Well, I don't really get it either, because there is huge bipartisan support for biomedical research, both sides of the aisle, and I think there's a recognition of how important it is, but where's the money coming from?
Is part of it that the feeling is that private philanthropy can fill in holes where the federal government steps out? Is that part of the mindset, or is it? I
don't think we can count on philanthropy, generous as it is, to fill the holes. I think we need to look at China, where they're investing $300 billion over the next 5 years in research and development, and ask ourselves, is America going to fall behind in innovation? You know,
the president, I mean, your funding, NIH funding went up in this budget, but as you say, as reflected by inflation, it's gone down 20-some% since 2003. Donald Trump, in his original budget, proposed a 20% cut, far worse than what ultimately comes out of Congress. Do you and your colleagues try to figure out how you can help educate a guy who is probably, I assume, fairly new to some of these issues? Is that part of the agenda or no?
I think it should be part of our agenda for educating everybody, because, you know, it's up to us as researchers and doctors to explain to the American taxpayer who's supporting us why it's so important to fund biomedical research.
Can you explain to me, I read something, I had no idea what I was reading, this CAR T-cell therapy. Explain in English why this is so exciting. What does it do?
What it does is take advantage of your own immune system. So we all have a natural immune system that is supposed to fight off tumors, just like it fights off viruses and bacteria. But sometimes the immune system gets exhausted in the presence of cancer cells. So what this new therapy does is to remove those immune cells from your body, genetically manipulate them so they're more powerful, expand them, and then infuse them back in, because they are now directed specifically at the tumor. And this has worked incredibly well in what we call liquid malignancies, leukemias, lymphomas.
It's pretty exciting.
It is very exciting.
So part of the research, part of the funding for that came from NIH grants too, correct?
That is correct.
So
Absolutely.
What happens if those grants had not been there? I mean, what would have been the concrete effect? What is the concrete effect of reduced, at least in terms of inflation adjustments, reduced federal funding? Would that discovery have happened as quickly as it did had it not been for the federal money?
I think probably not, because in its early stages, it's called basic research, and it requires scientists who are very comfortable with molecular pathways and cellular pathways. It's not the kind of research that can easily be supported elsewhere but at the NIH. And that research was absolutely critical to the development of the eventual therapeutic.
You know, I know you were part of the cancer moonshot thing. Everybody knows the Joe Biden connection with his son, who he clearly loved to death. I mean, it's really so moving. My assumption, until I did a little research, if it has either the name Biden or Obama on it, it is likely defunded by this administration. But I'm wrong, am I not? Is there not a continued effort? Am I right about that?
Yes, the Cancer Moonshot funding has continued. It has to be reauthorized every year.
And is the support there?
And the support is there for the Cancer Moonshot. So Dana-Farber certainly has benefited from some significant grants.
You know, I read an interview you did with someone in the Globe recently. I can't remember who it was, so my apologies to him or her. But you were talking about the future of a treatment of cancer, where it goes from fatal disease, which is what virtually all of us grew up with, fatal for almost everybody, to a manageable chronic disease. I think you likened it to the progression of HIV from its early stages, I guess, in the 80s.
So you have a very good memory.
To now. Well, that was
that's
like
exactly what I said.
And is that real? Is that within?
Yes, I think it really is. I'm an optimist when it comes to cancer treatments because we're making huge strides now. This has been a totally revolutionary time for cancer. The last decade absolutely has transformed how we treat cancer. And with some diseases, we've been very successful in already. Breast cancer, acute leukemia, several others. But there are other diseases, other cancers that have proved to be very intransigent. And we have to learn a lot more about the immune system and about the tumor genetics themselves in order to make those next big leaps. But they're there. They're there. I know we can find them. And I want to see cancer, if not cured, at least turned into a manageable disease.
I have to say, you see it every day and I don't, but when I hear a parent on the radio or on television or a sibling or a kid talk about what your operation has done for someone they love or their family, it is as moving as anything there is on the planet. So.
There was a wonderful article in the Globe today about our nurses and how wonderful they were. This was for a 13-year-old boy who had a very deadly form of cancer.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your work, and I hope that federal funding goes
Thank you
where
so
it
much.
should. Thanks
Pleasure.
so much.